if I were to walk into a room and somebody were to give me $1 million briefcase, I would instantly be worried for my life. Perhaps if you walked in a room and they give you $1 million briefcase, you'd say, yay, and you'd tweet about it and just walk out to your car like a dummy. That's how you get killed. I'd take the briefcase and I'd look around and see who else is in the room, and then I'd consider, can I get to my car alive? That's the life I've lived, right? We're all a product of the life we've lived. So perhaps people have come close. I have had incidents. I do carry scars. My finger came off from a knife here, you can see.
How did that happen?
They sewed back on.
They sewed your finger back on?
Yeah, you can see it.
Yeah, I see it. How did that happen?
It's a long story, but I got into an argument with a guy, and I have to be careful what I say, and I've never told this story online before, and I'm not going to give any much more detail. But he didn't threaten me. He just stopped replying. And then it was about a week later when I was walking through a car park.
Really?
Yeah. That's how the real world works. All this big talk tough and tweets and internet tough guy, all this shit is not real. No, because intent in and of itself can be hindered by your own mouth, right? If you have genuine intention, the last thing you're gonna do is destroy the element of surprise. If my intention was to genuinely hurt you, I would never sit here and say I'm gonna hurt you. I'd come to a podcast. I don't think the world really works in faults. I don't think it works in black and white. It's often varying shades of gray.
Okay.
There's no good team in this American infantile idea of good and bad. The fact you live in LA, there's a good guy, there's a bad guy, there's a superhero, there's an evil person who's just trying to conquer the world for no reason and enslave everybody for his ego, and there's a good guy who wants to risk his life to defend. That's not how the world works. Every single war, every single conflict, there's two sides and there's two opposing viewpoints, and some of them are part right and part wrong, which makes the world such an evil place. If it was truthfully good and evil, it'd be far easier to discern which team to be on. But often it's varying shades of gray. Someone is right about a certain element and someone's right about another certain element. And this is why there's such a large disagreement, whether it's a relationship or whether it's a war or whether it's a debt or money or an argument with some guy. This is how it works. It's very often you don't have rights and wrongs.
Okay.
But then you go deeper down the thing. Then what's right and what's wrong?
Okay, what is right and what's wrong?
Right and wrong is capability, because the victor is always right. The winner is always right.
Is that true?
Well, of course it is, because all of our narratives we hold are based on the winner writing the history books. Right? We decided who the good guy was because the good guy won the war. A bad guy's never won a war. Well, that's because they're both bad and they're both good, and whoever wins just paints the pictures like they were the good guy and the other person was the bad guy because their narrative reigns supreme. So really good guys always win war. So then you say, well, who's right and who's wrong? If he would have killed me, he would have been right. But he didn't. But this is the reality of the world. The reality of the world is the capability for violence. And this is what makes you right. The reason the American empire gets to be right globally around the world, the reason they get to decide what happens on certain issues, the reason they get to choose political leaders for other countries and start wars and end them in a whim is because they can destroy everything. Because they have the capability for violence, that makes them right. Nothing else matters. You can just make it up as you go along. Really? It's one of the best things about being rich. You don't need to have a system, and you don't need to really have a reason to do anything. I didn't have a reason to do this. I didn't have a financial motivation. I just thought, oh yeah.
Definitely not.
If I finished court today, I could have just turned around and just not come.
You probably had a long day.
Yeah, I could have just, I can leave now. I mean, I can do whatever I want, right? So sometimes I say yes to things and I don't really need a reason, because if you work out the reason for everything in life, the magic is destroyed. Haven't you ever had a girl you're truly in love with? And you love her with all your heart. If you sit down and think, why do I love her so much? You can start to name the reasons, and you'll name the positive reasons. But if you do it long enough, and if you're a professional and you're trying to be compendious, you're going to end up naming all the negatives as well. You're going to name all the positives, you're going to name all the negatives, you're going to analyze them all, and you're going to work it out that you're spending all this money and her tits are fake anyway, and you're not going to love her anymore. If you analyze it too heavily, the magic is gone. So maybe the magic of life is me just doing whatever I feel like because I have endless money. And I don't need a reason to do anything. Sometimes I talk to haters. Sometimes I talk to guys who like me. Sometimes I talk to small channels. Everything. Love is the most powerful force in the universe.
You think you lead with love?
I think every man...
Should you lead with love?
Absolutely. Every man with any degree of masculinity should lead with love. Why else would you risk your life if it's not for love? Right?
Oh, interesting.
Genuinely. Why does a soldier go to fight and die for his country? Is it because he hates the enemy, or is it because he loves his country? Why does a man protect his wife? Why does a man protect his kids? Why does a man do anything? Why does a man train hard and try and make money? It's because of self-love. You have to love things or you're just an empty shell. As a man, you should be full of love. I'm often accused of being full of hate because I have ideas and I'm against certain agendas, or I'm against certain countries or notions. Yeah. But that's not because I'm full of hate. It's because I love the other side. So the Matrix comes along and it tries to flip it. If you say, I love America, they're going to sit and say, oh, you're a racist or a xenophobe or whatever. And they're going to say you're full of hate, but you're not. You're full of love for something and you don't want it to change. If you love America, you don't want the demographics of America to change. You don't want the religion to change. You want it to stay the same. You don't want an open border because you love America. Thinking that everything is just fair. Like your view of the world is just like there's a judge and there's a lawyer and there's the police and everything's just fair. I'll put this to you. People can't even play a basketball game without a referee because if there's no referee, they cheat. For a basketball game, now you're going to talk about elections, controlling a country. You're going to talk about war. You're going to talk about some of the most famous people on the internet pushing ideas that you don't like or going against your narratives. And then you have to sit there and analyze as a professional and say, would there be some degree of cheating or snakery involved in this? It doesn't take much research to understand how governments have always worked throughout history and how they're currently working now. They want certain things done, and they're not going to let their own laws get in the way. So if you're the most famous man in the world at the time, I got arrested. I was the most Googled man on the planet.
You were.
I was the most Googled man on the planet with the #1 demographic they're most afraid of, which is military-age males, because they want them to go die in ditches or build the roads and build the bridges and work jobs and pay taxes and be depressed and miserable because there's no future for most men, which is why everyone's gambling on shitcoins in the first place, because they understand that if they go and get an engineering degree, they're never going to have any money. So there's no point becoming an engineer. So when the bridge collapses in Baltimore, it takes 9 years to build a bridge in the most powerful country in the world because we have no engineers, because everyone's gambling on shitcoins instead. And I don't blame them because they're trying to escape the matrix, because the matrix is worst for military-age males. And I'm telling this to them, and they want to get rid of me. Do you think I've needed to ever have committed a crime? Do you think I've needed to have done anything to fame, to super fame? And I don't want to be arrogant, but I believe I have super fame. I'm one of the most Googled men on the planet.
Famous. You have a large account.
Yeah, I mean, it's bigger than yours.
It's not saying much.
Most of the avenues to super fame are gate-kept, right? So YouTube can gatekeep you, your manager can gatekeep you, your producer can gatekeep you, a record label can gatekeep you, a sports team can gatekeep you. There's only certain things you can say before you end up losing your contract with whoever. And that team, that manager, whatever, those walls can be pressured into getting rid of you. I managed to become monumentally successful without any kind of gatekeeper. They kicked me off of all of the social media. It didn't work. I don't have a manager. I don't have a producer. I don't need a record label.
You have a manager?
No, it's all just me. So that annoyed them. And the reason they keep these gatekeepers in place is so that when they come out with certain narratives which can't be questioned, everyone shuts up, which is effectively how they get away with what they get away with. That's how the world works. So what they do with me, I can only speak from my own experiences. They come along and they say, here's $55 million. You're going to be sponsored by X, Y, Z, but you're going to have official opinions on these topics.
No way. And
when you say no to that contract, which infuriates them, by the way, they're not used to people saying no to money. It's also why they're after Trump, because they can't bribe him. He's 70-something and he's rich. You can't bribe him with money. He doesn't care. And that annoys them, because especially when weak people become rich, when strong people become rich, they understand the realities of the world. But when weak people become rich, like crypto dorks, they think that money is everything and they think they can buy everyone. And when they find someone they can't buy, they get very angry. So when you turn these contracts down, they get very angry and they start to say things like, well, you know, you're very famous and you've had a long and interesting past, Andrew, and you might need important friends one day. This kind of veiled bullshit. And you ignore them, and then you get arrested and you go to jail. That's how it works. If I would have signed that contract, I'm sure I would not have gone to jail, and I would have $55 million extra, but I would have sold my soul. And this is what you have to do to become monumentally successful in the world today. You have to sell your soul and sell your sanity. That's why all these famous people talk such utter bullshit. That's why they say such garbage. That's why all the politicians vote against the interests of their own constituents. That's why most of the other large podcasters, YouTubers you can name are sellouts. That's why when I was canceled, they all stood up in unison and said, yes, you should be canceled. Yes, yes. Because Susan called them and said, do you want to keep your YouTube channel? This is how it works. It's all a scam. So to decide to be sovereign takes a degree of bravery that most are not prepared for. After I turned that contract down, I said on every single podcast, they're going to put me in jail for something. I started saying it over and over and over.
I heard it.
Because I understand the world. And I knew what was going to happen. And what's going to happen at the end of this imaginary case I'm charged with, I don't know. Maybe I'll go to jail for 20 years. Maybe. But my sanity is not for sale. So do I want to sell my soul? Am I going to wear a dress? Am I going to...
Have you ever worn a dress?
Of course not. I'm not going to do anything stupid for the idea of my own safety.
Let me ask you this, is like...
the question I want to ask you, sir, is if you were in my position, what would you do? And I want you to tell the truth. Would you have taken that money and would you have certain ideas Because you're the kind of guy who just
look,
assaults
I'll be
people on the
honest.
internet, and you don't even
No,
think
yeah.
you don't live, you don't operate from a frame of honor.
Yeah.
So I'm asking genuinely.
let me say this to you.
Would you take the money and just
It's
sell your
not-
soul?